We were doing so much in such a short period of time. We had Afghanistan was on at the time. There was Iraq that was going on, which the SAS were dealing with. We were diving on cartel boats in Colombia, or rescuing hostages in Somalia. It was literally the busiest time in UK SF history. Doing pre-deployment training to go back out to Afghanistan again. Did a Halo jump. So you have Halo, which is skydiving. This one's actually connected to the aircraft. And I've done numerous jumps of these. And on this day, it was jump 3 of the day. When I exited, my leg got caught in the line above my head, so I was frantically trying to clear it in time. I couldn't clear it, and it ripped my leg over my head and to the right. Tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. Because of the altitude at 15,000 feet, you're on the limits of oxygen. It was so thin. And I was drifting in and out of consciousness as well, trying to fly this parachute. My friends went off to Afghanistan, and then I ended up entering the world of civilian street. I never wanted to leave the military. I was what we call a lifer. But no, thank you for your time. It's time to leave.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey friends, welcome back, and boy do I have an episode for you today who I interviewed my dear friend Dean Stott, who is British Special Forces, Tier 1 Special Forces, a storied 16-year career. When he graduated, he then transitioned and started and launched a very successful security company, and if that wasn't enough, decided to challenge himself and broke the world's record for cycling the longest road on earth from Ushuaia, Argentina, all the way to the north of Alaska. My friends, today you're going to learn about mindset, you're going to learn about leadership, and you're going to learn how to overcome adversity. Get ready. My man, Dean Stott, welcome to the show, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
So lots to cover. Guinness Book of World Record cyclist, Special Forces, Tier 1, incredibly storied career. You are just not American badass, you are an English badass, but living here in the States, and just super excited to have you on the show. A lot to unpack today, Dean. Give us the backstory as my first opening question.
Yeah, so the starting point was probably the military. My father was in the military, my grandfather was in the military. Continued that family tradition. Didn't really know what I wanted to do in the military at the time. My father was in the Royal Engineers, so I think because at the time I was weighing, as you Americans probably say, I was weighing about 150 pounds and I was 5'7". I wasn't the size I was today. So my father thought, well, he's probably only going to do about 3 years, so get what you can from the military in that short period. So I ended up joining the Royal Engineers. But as soon as I did my first course, basic training, I soon became confident physically and mentally, each course I went on. And in a short period of time, within 18 months, I went from 150 pounds to 200 pounds and 5'11". I literally just grew out as an individual. I was starting to turn into a man. But each course I was going on, I was getting physically stronger, but I was getting, more importantly, mentally stronger. At the age of 18, I did the All Arms Commando course, which is our Tier 2 Special Forces. Joined the Airborne Reconnaissance Unit within that and spent 8 years in Free Commando Brigade. And I saw all my friends then going off. The only option for me then was Tier 1 Special Forces. But coming from an Army background, I would have to go to the Special Air Service, the SAS. Mm-hmm. So here in America, if you're in the Army, you go to the Delta Force. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the Navy, you go to SEAL Team 6. Yeah. But I wanted to join the Special Boat Service, which was our other Tier 1 unit, the Naval Special Forces. Because the SBS recruiting is 100% from the Royal Marines, and I'd worked with them for the last 8 years. I was also now the senior diving instructor for the Army, so I was very comfortable being in the water. So much to the disgust of my friends in the SAS, I volunteered for the SBS. But unlike here, where Delta Force have their own selection and DevGru have theirs, SEAL Team 6, ours is joint. So it's actually the same course anyway. It's not that one is easier or harder than the other. And turned up on that course day one. Supposed to be the grey man. I was the grey man for about 2 minutes. My name was called out.
What do you mean grey man?
Grey man. So on these courses, especially a selection process where they're looking at you, you don't want to try and bring any attention to you for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons. What they tell you to do is try and just blend in. Don't stand out. Because later on, as the numbers dwindle, they will see who you are and they will be able to identify you. But you don't want to bring any attention to you, especially in the early stages. Yeah. So I was a grey man for 2 minutes. But 6 months later, from 200, we were down to the last 8 that finished, and I was one of those.
From 200 to 8?
200 to 8. We have a 95% attrition rate on selection, yeah. And so, I wasn't the grey man, but I was confident in my abilities. I knew I had what it took. I just had to ignore the background noise. And really all it was now in reflection is the SES were worried that if I went, how many other people would follow me along that path. And I think now 15% of their special boat service come from the Army. So yeah, one of the first to really open those gates. And for me, I'd reached my pinnacle in my career. You know, I was working alongside like-minded individuals, had the same drive and passion.
How old were you at this moment?
At this moment now, I was 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you entered when you were about 17.
Entered when I was 17.
So about 10 years
10 years later, then you're in the special forces. Because for us, you have to do a minimum amount of time as well. And I also went to Colchester Prison, which was a military prison, which actually stalls you to go special forces for 3 years. And so there was other things holding me back for that. But yeah, when I was successful at that, working alongside these other guys who had that sort of drive, passion, same goal, and we were doing so much in such a short period of time. We had Afghanistan was on at the time. There was Iraq that was going on, which the SAS were dealing with. You know, we were diving on cartel boats in Colombia, or rescuing hostages in Somalia. It was literally the busiest time in UKSF history. Fortunately, the first ever operational parachute jump for the SBS.
And are you saying you went on these operations, or just like in general?
So I wasn't in Iraq, but the other operations I was talking about, I was on those ones. Yeah, because what we had is the SAS would run Iraq and the SBS would run Afghanistan, and I think that's why we ended up getting a lot of Army guys in the end, because once Iraq tapered, the guys wanted to see where the action was, and so Afghanistan was the lean-to. But I was doing pre-deployment training to go back out to Afghanistan again on another tour, and I did a HALO jump. It's a high-altitude, high-opening jump. So you have HALO, which is skydiving, so you're just free of any lines. This one's actually connected to the aircraft, and as you exit the aircraft, the parachute will open for you. It's a static line, they call. And then you fly up to 30 minutes in the air, or 50 kilometers to the target area. And I've done numerous jumps of these. And on this day, it was jump 3 of the day, just a training exercise. But when I exited, my leg got caught in the line above my head. So I was frantically trying to clear it in time. I couldn't clear it, and it ripped my leg over my head and to the right. And straight away, instantaneously, I knew things were going through my head. I'm not going on tour. It's probably the end of my career.
You knew right away.
I knew right away. I'd never experienced pain like I was vomiting because of the pain. But because of the altitude at 15,000 feet, you're on the limits of oxygen. It was so thin.
Yeah.
And I was drifting in and out of consciousness as well, trying to fly this parachute. I could see my team in front of me, but my first concern was landing it. Because if I had a bad landing, I could damage the other leg. But I actually landed it one-legged. It was great landing. But
vomiting like one leg,
just one leg. Yeah. Well, as you're coming in, you have we call it a NATO T on the drop zone. So you look at it. What they tell you to do is come in, so the T is looking like forward, and the way that T is based on the winds on the ground level, because obviously at different levels in that above, there's different winds, different directions. So that tells you what the ground winds are doing. So I was watching all these other parachutists and seeing how they were landing, and then sort of gauge my landing. And yeah, it was a perfect landing. But unfortunately, the damage, I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. So normally, if you have an ACL tear or an MCL tear, your supporting muscles will be able to help you. I know a lot of rugby players and football players can still run with that, but it's the fact that all the supporting muscles went as well. So my friends went off to Afghanistan, and then I ended up entering the world of civilian street, which for me, I never wanted to leave the military. I was what we call a lifer. I wanted to do my full career and beyond until I was in my 50s. But no, thank you for your time. It's time to leave. And
so you were forced transition because of the injury.
Forced transition, and in a rapid time as well. Normally when you come up to your end of your career, they give you, there's almost like a 2-year transition program, workshops, and just, what is it you want to do beyond your time in the military? Do you want to be self-employed? Do you want to do a totally different career change? And they will give you the tools and the workshops to help you transition. Yeah, I didn't have that. I didn't. Literally, it was like, thank you for your time. Thankfully for me, I had my wife, who was very entrepreneurial. She was a bank manager for 4 of the biggest banks in northeast of Scotland at the time. Okay. And so everything that was worrying me about leaving, from the age of 17, I joined the military. I didn't know who who to speak to about getting my gas or my electric. It was already automatically done
Taken
for
care
me.
of you,
It's
yeah.
taken care of, like
Yeah.
your mother, your father. Thankfully for me, Alana picked up all those worries for me, and sort of that helped my transition. And she set up our first security company on her phone within 30 minutes. Did all the application form with Company's House. I'm like, for me, I would be worried about if I ticked the right box, and so those sort of worries had sort of subsided. But also, additional worry was she was 8 months pregnant, with our first child. In my head was, how am I going to support my family? Is there enough work out there? Because I haven't had this lead up, this transition. But within 48 hours of leaving the military gates, I got a phone call, asked to set up the British Embassy in Benghazi. So this is May 2011, during the Arab Spring.
Okay.
And soon went out there and started working there. I wanted to...
Shot it straight away.
Straight out within 48 hours.
So let's take a step back here for a second, because I want to unpack this a little bit.
Please.
There's just a lot of transition, and one of the things that I feel like parallel in entrepreneurship and specifically in military is when you're transitioning out your identity.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you in this particular transition? Because up at that point, you always want to be in the military, you want to be a lifer in your own words, and now this is forced on you. What does that look like from an identity and transition?
Yeah, I'm glad you pulled me back. I'd always skim over that bit.
Yeah.
But in reflection, I was going through what's known as an identity crisis. Because
Yeah.
where I got to in the military was because of my physical robustness. I got to where I was and achieved what I'd done because of my physical attributes. I now couldn't even run 100 meters without my knee giving way. So I'd lost that sort of physical ability. But also, I'd gone from knowing what I was doing day in, day out for the next 2 years. They literally have structure for you. I knew what I was doing for the next 2 years, working alongside like-minded individuals who had that drive and the passion, to where do I now fit in society? What is my role within society? Months before, we probably would be briefing up the Prime Minister on a hostage rescue. Now, no one knows who you are. We didn't have social media. We're not allowed on social media. So you're just almost like a ghost that's just entered this world, because no one's seen you for 16 years.
Yeah.
And it's very similar, when I do a lot of talks and things, there's similarities in, the sporting arena. When these professional athletes, they've done from a young age, they want to be a professional athlete. And so they're doing everything possible. They go through the amateur leagues, they then hit the professional leagues, and they're trying their best to stay on peak and perform at the highest level. And that's exactly what we're doing in Tier 1. And then as soon as you get injured, whether it's a bad tackle, whether it's a bad parachute, that's taken away from you. And so you see your friends going off on a rugby tour, or you see your friends going to Afghanistan, and you're left back, to pick up the pieces. But it's not just sport, it's not just special forces. I actually think identity crisis is for anyone who's been involved in any sort of team or any tribe. People can work for companies for 30 years, and then as soon as they leave those companies, they're lost.
I was going to say, it's a sense of loss. That's what it is.
That's it, yeah.
And that can be any transition, it can be career, it could be in military, it could be in sports, athletics. It could be launching a business. At the end of the day, like you're in a career path and you want to, attack something different, something new. But when you take that first step, you still feel that loss, like as you did in transitioning in that particular.
Yeah, and people want to set up their business as well. A lot of people are happy to have that, stay into that blanket, knowing they're going to, from a big company, knowing they're going to get paid each month, knowing they're supported to taking that leap. And when they do take that leap, I always say the net will catch you, the safety net will catch you. You just got to take the leap. But yeah, and then there is that sort of identity loss. Well, I was part of a tribe. And there's a great book called Tribe anyway. We like to be, especially the males, we like to be part of a tribe. Mm-hmm. And then, I come from this tribe. I can't get back into that tribe. So what other tribes do I fit in? And sometimes you're looking for these tribes, and that's why guys like to do probably the MDK project. They feel like they're part of a tribe. They feel like they're part of a community and things like that. And
totally. Bejos Jay and I actually at Bejos Cooling Live, where we first met, we launched a Legacy Tribe, which is like, coaching group for, guys and gals who want to, develop their self-mastery, personal growth, leadership skills, create more income and impact. But doing it in a tribe, in a community, just, is way better.
It's better, yeah. And you feel like you're not alone as well.
Yeah.
You then meet other like-minded individuals and realize actually there's other people out there either suffering like you are or have the same sort of drives or goals as you. So yeah, tribes are very important, especially for the male community.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. So I interjected there. It's 2011. You basically had to be forced retired. You then now shifted off to, I guess, open the embassy in Benghazi. So take it away.
Yeah, so I moved over there, moved over to Benghazi. So at the current situation on the ground now, so Benghazi is on the east of Libya. Over in the west was Tripoli, and Colonel Gaddafi.
Oh, this is when everything was going
This
down.
is all when it was going down.
Yeah,
Gaddafi was there. The city had now been circled, so it was only a matter of time before it was going to fall. So in Benghazi, you just had so many oil and gas companies, NGOs turning up, security companies, because they're just media companies. They're just waiting to get in and fill the gaps, and help the Libyan people and probably take advantage of the oil and the situation. So I was there, and we were in this hotel called the Tibesti. It was the biggest hotel, and so you had the UN there, all the media, and I was watching these security companies, and I was just sat there having a coffee, listening to them. And these guys are selling 6-figure, 7-figure sums for retainers and crisis management evacuation plans. When in fact, and these oil and gas and NGOs were signing away, and I was like, there's actually nothing there. You're signing for something that's probably not even there. And then it became apparent later on that actually my words were true. So I flew back 2 weeks later. My wife gave birth to our daughter Molly, and I said, look, I've got an idea. These guys are selling these evacuation plans. Libya didn't want security companies. They didn't want it being another Afghanistan and Iraq. They didn't want security companies coming in with their own weapons. They didn't want to see Westerners carrying weapons, and they wanted to take control of their country. But this period of time, while there's still this civil war, there was a huge proliferation of weapons. So I needed to act quick. So I went back in and I bought 30 weapons off the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt. Spent a month in the desert just burying them in pelly cases with communication kits and money.
What was the purpose?
The purpose was, because I knew if we had to have an evacuation or if you needed them, we could drive in or we could fly in with no weapons, but I knew where they were if we needed them. And they were located next to safe houses that I had across the country. So it wasn't the fact that, it was just all more of a comfort. They're there if we needed, because if we needed them, then it meant it was like, it's another civil war. If we didn't need them, then at least I had the comfort of knowing they were there. So that was it. I mean, we lived in Aberdeen, which is the oil and gas capital of Europe. So they're like the Houston of America. And so we had access to a lot of oil and gas companies. And yeah, I sold my evacuation plan to those guys, some of the smaller companies, and sort of sat on that. Again, fortunate for me, my wife, very entrepreneurial. I could have easily gone and got a contract with a security company or an oil and gas company, done 6 weeks in Iraq, 6 weeks back, and done those rotations. But I wanted to be a bit more entrepreneurial. I wanted to learn more about the industry. I wanted to find a niche within the industry. I wanted to stand out. I just didn't want to do more rotations. So I was doing ad hoc jobs. Every phone call was a different job. Every time I took a call, it was a different country, different task. When you tell people in the security, they probably think you're a doorman from the local nightclub, but it's everything from surveillance, close protection, coaching, mentoring, there's crisis management. There's so much. And then you've got cyber and all these other things now bolted onto them. And so I was getting, one phone call would be like, the UAE royal family, their super yacht wants to go from Barcelona to Maldives. Can you take the crew down to Maldives? That's a cracking job. The next one, can you go to Kurdistan and train the special forces there to fight ISIS? The next one, you'd find yourself in South Africa, or you then find yourself out in Venezuela. So literally, in a short period of time, I was learning a lot about the security industry. I was getting exposure to so many countries and so many guys on the ground, and it's really built up a reputation. But I tended to find that, so people don't realize, in the security industry, the risk-reward ratio isn't balanced. Like, you could be in Iraq or Afghanistan on let's say, like $500 a day, the job. Or you could be looking after a CEO of a multi-billion-pound organization on $1,500 a day in a 5-star hotel in Paris or Barcelona. It isn't balanced at all. So I was really focusing on that sort of corporate close protection. But each time I did a good job, there was always a bad job behind it. And so I just finished the London Olympics in 2012. Great 6 weeks in London, got exposed, went to all the events, my family were there. It was amazing. Yeah. And then next week I was in Benghazi, and it was September 11th, 2012, when the American ambassador got killed. And they made a movie called 13 Hours. And I got a phone call from a German oil company called KCA Deutag asking if I could help him. And so I took them from Benghazi to Tripoli through safe houses that I had already designated and had in my evacuation plan over a 36-hour period. And because of the success of that, 2 years later, I was in Brazil, the World Cup, the Football World Cup. Yeah, another great sporting event.
2014 at this point.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah, and done lots of jobs in between. And same scenario. I was at a major sporting event, and then I get a phone call from the Canadian embassy. The Tripoli war in Libya, civil war between the militias and the government. All the other embassies had gone, all the security companies had left, but these guys were sort of left behind. And they said, look, your name, multi-billion-pound security companies, your name keeps coming up.
Well, let me ask you, actually, from my business mind, I'm thinking, okay, like you're clearly making a name for yourself, so you're getting these calls. Is this completely off referral and word of mouth and your reputation?
Yeah, this was pretty much on reputation at this stage. Yeah, reputation referral. I've never had a website. I've never really needed one. It's almost like Alana, my wife said, I got a name of, what is it? It's the man who goes when others won't, or something. It was something like that. Normally if people are going that way, I'm walking the other way. I sort of joke when I speak to some clients now. I goes, normally if you see me, it means it's all gone wrong, or this is your last resort. But it wasn't. So I'll go back to that slightly. But so I ended up going in and I single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy, 18 military and 4 diplomats. Got them from Tripoli to
When you say
Tunis.
single-handedly, meaning like you yourself or your team of people, I would imagine.
So my team was me, my fixer, who was a Libyan guy, and the success of this. Yeah, I'll go back to my team. Me, my fixer, and then 2 drivers who had fish wagons. That's all I needed, just 4 of us. Yeah, 3 locals and me. And so really, when I sort of tell these stories, and there's more that'll come, sounds very sexy in Hollywood and things like that. But actually, when you hear about special forces, you see all the movies on Hollywood and things like that, and that's known as the offensive action, the biceps, the bullets, the bullets and the bombs, as we call it. Your Dwayne Johnsons, your Jason Statham's, the Expendables, the makers look good, and it helps probably Navy and Army recruiting a lot. But actually, that's 25% of what we do, and that's normally our last resort. 50% of what we do is called support and influence. It's hearts and minds. So a lot of times, as Tier 1 SF, we get embedded with locals as 4 to 6 man teams, working with tribes, understanding the ground truth of what's going on. So for me, that's what I did in security. I just literally took that skill set. I didn't need the weapons. They were there if I needed them, but I didn't walk around. I've never had to carry a weapon on any of my security jobs ever. And it was understanding the demographics, the politics, the tribal influences. My fixer, we were going from Tripoli to Tunis. This is the West. Benghazi and Tripoli are totally different. There's 1,600 tribes in Libya. So it's understanding having the right fixer for the right area. So when I did the Benghazi one, I couldn't take the drivers. It took us from the Benghazi to the safe house onwards to Tripoli. I had to get those drivers in. So it's really understanding, the ground truths as well. And that was the success.
So 50% of your role is influencing like the situation on the ground.
Situation on the ground. And not what the media, I call it the media monster, not what the media monster is telling me, what is actually happening on the ground. So when I used to go Yemen, Somalia, I go on my own. And I go on my own, and I'm not then getting any of these security reports or media reports, and I'm like, this is the ground truth. Yes, there is a threat, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone's making out. When I go to Mogadishu, I go spearfishing off Mogadishu. It's beautiful coastline.
So what's your skill set there? Because Dean, when I think of leadership, actually, we're going to talk about that today with you and your journey. I think leadership is influence and being able to lead people, lead yourself first and foremost, but then be able to lead influence the situation in terms of people having a good understanding from a preparation perspective. How does this all come together? What are the skill sets you need?
I think the skill sets for me, my wife says my USP is I can communicate with anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a member of the royal family or whether you're a young boy in the street. I will not change my tone or my approach to you. I will talk to you. Doesn't matter what culture, what religion you're from. I speak to everyone. I'm not a religious person. I'm very impartial. And apparently that comes across, because you look at me, you look like a big bold guy with tattoos and quite scary to approach. But, that's what my wife says is those communication skills. You can do that. But from a leadership, I think you have to always lead by example. When I used to be an instructor on the All Arms Commando course, and I remember doing my commando course, and the instructors, I'd learned nothing on my commando course. I learned how to be cold and wet and do a lot of PT. But the instructors would just shout all the time, so I didn't pick up on anything. But when I went back as an instructor, it was totally different. We were having to teach them, but we still had a couple of instructors. I remember them coming out every morning. They'd come out, and of course, we'd be doing press ups, and I'm like, well, and then they'd leave, and I said, so why have you been giving press ups? And they're like, we don't know. I was like, okay. So I would really have a bit of banter with them. And if they did press ups, I'd do them with them. I never asked them that I couldn't do myself. And that's one thing that was important. And I remember on one of the end of course drinks, the students said they found me more intimidating than the other two.
Why?
Because I was almost a smiling assassin, because when they did mess up with me, as in a genuine mess up, it was 10 times worse than what they gave them. But they also felt they'd let me down. That was the difference. They didn't really have any respect for these guys. Just because they scream and shout and curse, it's like, okay.
But is that because did you develop a relationship? Why did they feel that connected with you?
It was more that relationship thing. You know, when I come out, I get, right, who's got a joke? You know what I mean? Get a joke. You know, because you also, I've been in their position before. I remember being 18, nervous like that, a little skinny boy, and we're like, oh my God, what are they going to do to us today? So it's almost like, just calm them down. You know, because they can't spend 10, 12 weeks on a course in fear, you know, and it needs to be the balance. There needs to be an element of fear that they don't not on the sun lounger.
Yep.
But you've got to get the balance right. And that's what I saw through my time in the military. I saw good leaders and I saw bad leaders, and I literally was just hand-picking the best bits.
That's a great point. From your perspective, what would be the qualities that you see in some of the best leaders, and then the opposite in terms of leaders that you just never connected with or never could follow rank? What are the qualities and the separations of both?
I think, as I just touched on there, the ones that scream and shout, and the ones, and it doesn't matter if you scream and shout, the ones who didn't do, you know, like I said, I would never ask anyone I couldn't do myself. And I used to see it sometimes, like on our commander course team, we had a really good team actually, even with the other two guys who were quite angry. We all carried the kit. We all volunteered to carry the kit. And then I remember we had an officer once who came on and he started doing these star jumps alongside him and things like that. And then I grabbed his Bergen at the end. He had nothing in it. And I was just like, okay. And I remember we, on day one of the course, they have to do, I think it's 10 overarm pull-ups. It's the entrance test. And there's so many other tests. A 1.5 mile run in boots in 9 minutes, you know, these sort of things. And we would do it with him. And he said, oh, no, we can't do it with him. I said, why? It's in case we fail. I said, well, if we're failing, then we shouldn't be on this training team. And so that's the biggest one for me is the fact that it's having that presence without being vocal. You know what I mean? You can still have presence and have respect from your students just purely by leading by example, because they're looking at you all the time.
Totally.
They're watching you all the time.
Totally.
And because I know I've been there as a student and I was watching all the time. And so for me, that's the biggest thing about being a leader.
What about from your lens, being the high pressure environment that you work in? And certainly me being a CEO of a business, international fitness business, there's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah.
However, there's a different level of pressure in terms of the business and civilian world than the things that you experience. So what does that look like to you?
I don't think there is. You know, sometimes I think the pressures of some of the CEOs of these corporates is harder than ours. You know, when we were in the teams, you know, the only pressure we had was to get my team, everyone on our team, back on that helicopter or back on that submarine or whatever alive. That was the pressure I had. It was quite a small...
I would argue that's pretty good pressure.
You know, if something went wrong, then it's life-changing, it goes wrong. But then you've got some of these CEOs who, you know, they've got, got 1,500 staff. Those staff then have families. You know, those numbers start getting bigger. You know, if you start making wrong decisions, it has that waterfall effect. You know, your bad decision then may lose jobs. Then, I think that family then may be struggling or, you know, homeless, whatever. You know, so for me, I didn't see that. I've actually got quite a small responsibility compared to some of the other CEOs. So it depends. Like for me, my wife says, like, you can drop me anywhere in the world and I'm actually relaxed. But when it comes to the business side of work, contracts, and that's Alana's bag. And the reason, you know, Alana has a book called How to Ask for Money. And the best way you should put it, we come from an environment, you know, if I was planning an operation in Afghanistan and I needed like 2 Chinook helicopters, I needed a Spectre gunship, I needed fast air, I needed UAV, I needed 40 guys, I needed so much ammunition. No one gives me a price. No one tells me that bottom line, what that price is. It's automatically done for you. You know, there's no contracts, there's no NDAs, there's no RFIs. And so we come from an environment where we're not comfortable in asking for money. We're not comfortable talking about business. It's automatically done for us. And so that's where some people struggle as well. So that's why I think, actually, me on the ground, I'm quite chilled. Alana's back home dealing with all the contracts and everything else. That for me is more intimidating than what I do on the ground.
So I want to stop there for a second. I want to kind of continue down the conversation about security and then the big world record that you knocked down. But speaking of Alana, correct?
Yes, Alana.
You are able to work with her. She's your business partner.
Yeah.
And interestingly, and I've seen in my business career in the fitness space, a lot of times people decide to partner with their spouse. And it can be a very good thing. It also can be very challenging in the same right.
True.
So could you shed some light from your perspective in terms of working with her, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, so Alana had the financial background. And when I met her, she then trained to be a close protection officer, surveillance and things like that. And then she got, then we had Molly. So we always really worked together. I've had other business partners, and she's always sort of said, give me little warning signs, and I was like, oh, no, these guys know what they're doing, and then I've been let down, and then we always end up coming back together. I remember one of my friends, he's ex-SAS, saying, oh, you can never work with your wife, it just won't happen. But actually over the years we've found that actually it does happen. When I was talking about the tribe earlier, I was coming out from a tribe of amazing talent and professionals, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, these guys, and I'm trying to find it. When actually it was already under my nose. She was already there. She had everything I was looking for in those skill sets. Mm-hmm. And so, we've literally done this. We've come out and we come back together, I mean, we've actually realized now the last few years, actually, let's just work together. The hardest thing we find is trying to take work out of the house.
Yeah.
That's the problem, because it's always work. It's just consuming, and you can never get away from work. Our nature of our work as well, being security, you're 24/7, 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. In the 12 years that I've been out, there's 2 Christmas days that I've left. Even on Christmas Day, I'm working. So that's the hardest thing about our job, and something we're mindful of moving forward is that there has to be your home time. I mean, it has to be a work time.
So creating that separation.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I mean, clearly your skill sets are different. So I would imagine they're very complementary in terms of working together. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's probably the success of our relationship in business is that strengths, weaknesses. She knows my strengths and she knows my weaknesses. And thankfully, my weaknesses are her strengths and her weaknesses are mine. So we sort of entwine. I'm very physically strong. Lana doesn't do much PT, believe it or not. She got burnt as a young child. So when she was going through, spent 18 months in hospital in a wrap, back in the days, medication's a lot better now. So academically shot up because the school was just giving her all her work, and she just shot up, got A stars and everything, but physically wasn't doing those. So anything academically wise, she's good. Anything physically, I'm good. She's more of an introvert. I'm very much the extrovert. Mm-hmm. And so really we just complement each other, yeah.
Now, what would be the most challenging thing? And the reason I just asked this is important because, when partners are coming in and, it can be a really, really good thing. My wife and I, we work together. Yeah. We built, our fitness businesses for the last 10 years, local brick and mortars within the Fit Body franchise. It's been incredible. Same thing. We have opposite skill sets, but also it can be challenging. Yeah. So from your lens, what does that look like as well? And some things to look out for if an audience is listening in about to partner with their spouse.
Yeah, so for me, actually, believe it or not, I'm more risk averse than my wife when it comes to business. I'm worried, because I've never dealt with money and things like that. So I'm worrying about certain things. And she's like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's a frustration for me. But also, trust each other, and actually listen to each other. Because there's been periods of times where I was like, well, these guys are the experts, Alana. We need to be listening to them. And then actually, she had the right answer all the way along. There are people out there who will pull the wool over your eyes. That's why we don't have a website, is because the amount of security companies out there, all ex-special forces, all do this, that, and that. It just depends on their marketing budget. For me, it's actually, we don't need it because we know that we have the talents. So for me, trust and listen to your partner, trust them. And that's it. Communication's key. I've done it a few times where I've just like, okay. Actually, going back to the Canadian Embassy, I came back from that trip and I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar.
Cool.
I thought Alana wanted me to be out working when she thought I wanted to be out working, and we hadn't actually communicated. And we nearly split it out there. Chapter 16 is called Dead or Divorce. That's the conversation.
By the way,
we're
just
having.
got gifted my man Dean Stott, Relentless, right here. I'm going to dive into it. Thank you, my friend.
So chapter 16 is Dead or Divorce. We sat down, a couple of bottles of red wine, and she's like, "You do realize, you've only been home 21 days." And I totally
the whole year.
In a whole 365-day calendar,
Holy
yeah.
smokes.
And what it was, I disconnected from society. But what I was doing, and another sort of pin drop moment in my life was, I was trying to match that adrenaline rush I had when I was in the Special Forces without coming to terms with the fact that I'd actually left. Thankfully for me, all my missions as a civilian were successful. But should there be an issue, I didn't have the team guys coming in to rescue me. You were on your own. And so... yeah, that again, that's where I sort of reference as partners, communication's key, talk to each other. Because, we never...
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's important. Partnerships, leadership, business, life, military work, so...
yeah, everything.
Love that. All right, well, I interjected there. Continue on the path, and eventually I want to lead us to the big world Guinness Book of World Record, I guess, that you nailed home. So why don't you walk us through?
Well, I think, probably from that moment, that conversation Alana and I had, she said, you don't need to be taking these risks. She was also a property developer, had her own property developing business, which was doing really well anyway. So financially, we didn't need me going out. She thought it was more for me to get my thrills. Yeah. And so decided to take a sabbatical, hung up my security boots for a period of time. And this leg now, this is 5 years now after leaving the military to this point. And this leg now was 2 kilos lighter than this leg. Lighter.
Oh, wow.
Because of the muscle wastage. And
for all my American friends, this is a solid 5 pounds roughly.
Yeah, 5 pounds. Yeah, in my right leg. And so during this period of 5 years in the security industry, I sort of neglected my own physical and mental well-being. I took a TRX with me, and if I could train, I would train, but I wasn't really allocating any time for my own physical and mental wellness. And so I just bought a road bike off Amazon. Our office at this time in Aberdeen was about 8 miles away from the house. So I just cycled to and from the house. But within that first week of cycling, there was almost like a huge weight off my shoulders. That identity I said earlier about losing my physical attributes. I had my lungs going again. I felt great. But, you've heard my backstory. I'm sat in these architects and planners meetings with Alana. She's giving me our new son Tommy. I'm holding him, and she's just doing all the business. And I just felt I wasn't contributing. And she looked over and she could see that glaze in the eyes. So we got home and she said, "Look, this isn't for you. You need to do something to keep yourself physically and mentally engaged, but I'm not letting you go back out and start, risking your life." And I said, well, we did a lot of philanthropy. We had, up in that 5 years as well, we do a lot in the philanthropy sector with veterans. And so we were already doing stuff anyway. I said, well, let me do a fundraiser and maybe a world record. And she said, well, what in? I said, well, cycling's good, because it won't hurt my knee. I was trying to find a sport that had
impact.
and although I hadn't cycled more than 20 miles in my life, something that was low impact. And so living in Scotland, I thought, Alana was going to do east to west coast. She pulls out the Guinness Book of Records and then just points at this challenge. And the first challenge we looked at actually was Cairo to Cape Town. But majority of my security work was all in Africa. So I'd seen the continent anyway. So I wanted something that was going to be new to me. Mm-hmm. And she found the world's longest road. It's called the Pan American Highway. It runs from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. 14,000 miles.
14,000 miles.
Yeah, 22,000 kilometers. Yeah, 14 countries, 2 continents. So I said, perfect. So having only cycled 20 miles, I applied for the world record.
You've cycled 20 miles in your life at this point.
At maximum ever 20
Maximum.
miles. Yeah.
And the great idea to actually knock down the world record.
Yeah, well, I knew that, mentally I had the robustness. Endurance-wise, I've been tested before. I just had to do it in something that, took me out of my comfort zone and was new to me.
Yeah.
And so, I applied for the world record. It was 126 days at the time. And
was the record.
Was the record at that point when I applied for the world record.
Yeah.
6 weeks later, Guinness came back and said, yes, you've been successful in the application form, but now the new world record is 117 days. In that period of the 6 weeks, a Mexican guy called Carlos had already, shaved 9 days off, 9 days.
What year is this roughly?
So this is now towards the end of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have this idea.
Yeah.
Okay. You like a challenge.
Yeah.
You're up for it. Although you haven't cycled more than 20 miles in your life.
Yeah.
You have the mental fortitude for
Yeah.
it. Your wife's throwing out, different options. You thought maybe in the UK, one in Cairo, South Africa, but she actually pulls out the Pan American Highway, 14,000 miles.
Yeah, the world's longest.
you figure, okay, I'm going to put in an application for the Guinness Book of World Records. It comes back, and by the time the application comes back, 9 days has been shaved off by another dude. What's your thought process here, and what's the next step?
My thought process there was, my thought process was I need to get on a bike first. There was two things. There was the planning side and there was the physical side. So within a week, I ended up there. So for a lot of cyclists, they train over the summer to do a century ride. It's like a 100-mile ride. Yep. And the following weekend, there was a century ride in and around Scotland. It was called the Etap Royale, which wasn't far from us in the country of Scotland. So I hired a bike and I entered this race, did the 100 miles. I remember seeing people in their 60s, 70s, just coming past me, and I was like, oh my word, and it really opened my eyes how difficult, it could be cycling. But actually, what it did, it gave me a boost, is that actually these people are old, because that was one of the things as well. I'm aged 40 when I'm applied for this world record, so I'm not a young pup, and so that also gave me a bit of a kick up the bum, but also motivated that age isn't a barrier on this. 2 weeks later, so we did it for a charity called Heads Together, which was a mental health charity. 11 charities, 4 veterans, 7 civilian ones, everything from young children, teenagers, all the way up to the veterans and the adults. And so I did a promo video with Prince Harry, a good friend of mine. It was his charity that we said we'd do it for. So when the cameras had finished on the promo video, he said, oh, what sort of training are you going to do? And there's a famous ride in UK called Land's End John O'Groats. It's top of Scotland to the southwest corner of England. It's like cycling from LA to Portland. It's about 950 miles.
Oh, yeah. And
so Harry had asked if I would do it at some of the members of Invictus Games in the following March. And we're in October now. Yep. I said, yeah, of course, but I wasn't comfortable just going on a ride with him. I wanted to sort of like do it myself. And so 2 weeks later, only 2 weeks been cycled Land's End John O'Groats, did everything completely wrong.
Nearly 1,000 miles.
Nearly 1,000 miles. Did it all completely wrong. I saw it in a magazine. Someone did it in 9 days. I was like, I'll do it in 9 days. And people were like, you're not bike fit. You're not ready. I thought bike fit was fitness. Right. When actually it was a measurement to your bike. I did everything completely wrong. But I had to do it because the Pan America Highway was 15 Land's End John O'Groats back to back at a 6-day rate, not a 9-day pace. And so it was a mental boost that I had to go through.
And I have to think people in the UK who do this particular race in the UK, that is like the pinnacle of their career.
Yeah, a lot of people, it would be on their bucket list. Yeah, it's on their bucket list, whether they do it in 9 days, whether they race it, or whether they just take their time. It's what they want to do. But for me, it was a training ride.
It was a training ride.
Yeah, and I never mean to sound arrogant, because then 6 months later, I did it with the Invictus Games guys, and we set off this time from Scotland down, and it was a totally different experience. I now had 6 months training in. I had a coach. I knew about cadence. I had a bike that fit me, and I just saw it as a training ride. It was a 9-day training ride, and it had to be. I had to sort of get into that mindset for that.
Holy smokes! So you knocked that down.
Yeah.
Now, what's the next preparation look like for the big race?
So next preparation, I was looking at the countries that were going through, the temperatures, and it literally had everything. When I did the bike ride, it went from plus 47 degrees centigrade, 120 plus, to minus 18 degrees centigrade, and everything in between. So I fortunate in the military to have been in the desert, the jungle, the Arctic, operated them, but I've never done it on a bike.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to sort of replicate those situation scenarios before I went on the challenge.
And from a preparation perspective, to simulate the same conditions.
So I flew out to Dubai. It was 50 degrees out there. Did 2 weeks cycling.
50 degrees centigrade, which is probably like 125 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly.
That's it. Yeah. So I was cycling in the day for 4 hours and cycling at night, which is still probably about 110.
Okay.
And then, just so I could be happy with myself, what my body was doing, what I needed to do to adjust to ensure that I could do 100, 150 miles. I had a friend who had a CrossFit gym out in Thailand, 100% humidity, but the roads weren't safe. But I went out there, did a lot of CrossFit training. I actually started the bike ride weighing 200 pounds. I didn't look like an endurance cyclist, but my mindset...
Because cyclists are probably so lean and...
As thin as that pen. If my coach had had me 2 to 3% body fat, as thin as that pen.
And here you are, 200 muscle-bound dude.
Yeah, but I'd not cycled anything like that. I'd done 9 days, whatever. But for me, it was like, when we start Special Forces selection, you don't start day one 100% fit, because you'll burn out by week 2 or 3. You start about 75, 80% fit, carrying a bit of weight, and then as the course goes, it'll be hard at the beginning, but as you start shaving the weight, as you start getting fitter, you have those reserves. And so that was the mindset I had for this. But it was also doing the research, it was almost like doing a polar expedition. I would lose weight from the day I started to the day I finished. I would never be able to put on weight because of the amount of calories I was burning.
You knew that going in.
I knew that going in. And so I wanted to have that additional weight to help me. So without spoiling it, well, I will spoil it, but I started at 90 kilos or 200 pounds, and I finished at 78 kilos.
Which would be?
25, 26 pounds.
Oh, wow. So you lost 25 pounds in the journey.
So I know it was a right decision to have that weight on.
Oh, yeah.
So I was doing all that training, altitude-wise. There's a famous bike ride called Tour de France.
Oh, yeah.
And they do about 20 to 25 kilometers, their biggest climb each year, depending which route. My biggest climb was 67 kilometers, from sea level to 4,500 meters in a day. So I went from the banana plantations up into the mountains. And so again, I had to work at altitude. I found a altitude center. I would cycle at altitude. One of the hardest bike rides, I did a 10-hour watt bike session, solid, just on a watt bike in the altitude room.
What type of bike is that?
A watt bike is it gives you the power. It tells you your wattage, the power you're pushing through your pedals. It's on a screen in front of you. A lot of cyclists use it now. Yep. Yeah. So I use, you've got to try and keep the perfect peanut. It's about balance of power. So I did 10 hours. I had a shopping bag on the handlebars with just snacks, just 10 hours at altitude, and people were coming in throughout the day in London and sort of joining me. So, but again, just to tick off that on the day, I can cycle 10 plus hours a day at altitude.
So what's this preparation look like? How much time are you, setting your preparation before you actually attack?
1 year. We gave ourselves 1 year, yeah. So I was due to set off, it's a bit over a year actually, because I did the video in the October, did the Land's End John O'Groats in the November, and we then got our main sponsor, probably again, October 2017. And my original start date was the 1st of March 2018. And they said, look, we have a big annual company meeting. Can you come guest speak? 10,000 people in the O2 Arena. They then became the sponsor. And so for me, I was like, perfect. But I wasn't comfortable in breaking in my training to come down for a week, do all the PR, to then go back home for maybe a week and a half, to then fly to Argentina. So I was like, spoke to my wife, Alana, who was running the campaign, all the logistics, spoke to the support team and the documentary team. They were ready. I was physically and mentally ready, so I brought it forward a month. So for me, I was getting into the right mindset. Alana said she sees it every time I leave is I start disconnecting from the family and getting into the zone. So I wanted to say goodbye to my kids, and then that was it. I didn't want to be then coming back and then say goodbye to my kids and then get into the zone and get ready. And so we moved it forward a month. We had a big fundraiser that evening of the ACM. They raised £265,000 and then matched it pound for pound. So we had £530,000.
You raised nearly $500,000 or over $500,000
before it even set off.
And how did you do that?
So Heads Together, which is the mental health campaign, the launch platform for that was the London Marathon. But you had Prince Harry, William, Kate. They were the patrons for it, and everyone started talking about mental health. So a lot of the big corporates wanted to get behind that and sort of support that.
Did you leverage your relationship with Prince Harry? He's a good friend of yours?
We tried to leverage it, but it actually becomes more of a negative than a positive. moving forward, a lot of people think having a big name, it helps, and actually it doesn't really. It did help, and it didn't help. Okay. I think on this matter, it probably did help.
Okay.
But also we were fundraising as well. We also were planning. This was one of the strangest things. We'd done a fundraising event in Aberdeen a few months before, and we raised £70,000 towards the charity, which is good. But we had to use £50,000 of that as a deposit for the hotel for the welcome back function. We were planning a function 6 months before I was even setting off. And, so you can imagine that. We got this fundraising team together, which was led by Alana. We had a huge events manager down in London, and we were having this conversation. And she's like, so Dean, what is the contingency plan? And I never used to answer her. And Alana would say, well, the contingency is we go to Dean's funeral. So, and she's a good friend of mine, Amanda. But you can imagine the pressure. We're already selling tickets with Prince Harry as a guest for this thing, for the welcome back, that I'm going to break this world record.
Like once you finish the race, this is a welcome back celebratory
this was
event.
within about 4 weeks of getting back. Yeah.
Okay.
4 weeks of getting back. But so yeah, that was all going on behind the scenes as well. So not only were we planning the campaign, the bike ride and training and everything else, we were also, trying to could we set a target of £1 million? That was our target as well. The world records was for me. The world records was so that I had motivation to get up every morning when it's snowing, get out. I had to have a target. In the military, we're very target driven, or mission driven, and that was the mission. That was the mission, and so that was my mission. And Lana's mission was £1 million. So we had a number of things going on at the same time,
which is very, very, I guess, relatable to the business world. You got to have a mission. This is why I love working with people from the military. A lot of people from the military have came in and joined our brand because that mission focus. You set a target and you take action until you hit it.
You have to, you have to. And so we set off and keep it short. The world record was 117 days, as I mentioned. I was aiming for 110, and it wasn't because I wanted to smash it by a week. When I was looking at the planning and the researching and everything else, there was things that are out of my control. Natural disasters, coups in the country. There was a coup actually in Nicaragua 4 weeks after I'd cycled through. Third party influence, things are out of your control. If you encounter any of them, I didn't want to eat it into my time. I wanted to give myself that fudge. And so my target was always 110 days on the challenge.
You just build in fudge or float, I would call it, like an extra week.
Extra week, yeah. So if we did encounter them, I'm not then chasing myself. I've given myself.
And when your target is 110 days, did you reverse engineer like how many miles per day that you'd run, the timing and all that?
Yeah, we had a thing called the Oracle, and we literally knew how many miles we were going to do each day, up until the end. But that only lasted the first week. The first week we had 50-mile-an-hour winds in Honduras, Nicaragua, in Ushuaia, the bottom of Argentina.
It's like bottom of the earth.
The bottom of the earth, yeah. Living in Aberdeen is like living in Chicago. It's the windy city. But I'd never experienced winds like it. So by the end of the first week, I was 30 miles behind target. But my target was still a week ahead of the world record. And then from then on, the weather changed. And from that point on, I was just gains. It was gains and gains.
In a good way.
In a good way. I mean, the Oracle kept changing.
Now, let me ask you here, sorry to interject, but you said you start in Argentina. Knowing your story, I actually want to be able to provide you some space to give the insight to our audience why you started in Argentina, because from my understanding, the previous world records didn't go that route.
No, they didn't. When I was doing my research, I was looking at the route, and the guys were going from Argentina to Alaska. And one of the things we do in the military, one of the reasons one of the best military or special forces in the world isn't because we got the best caliber of guys, the best training. It's because we're always learning. Learning from other people. Gathering that information and learning from our mistakes. And so I reached out to the previous record holders. And there was a guy who did it in 126 days, Scott Napier. Carlos, who broke it in 117 days. There's two gentlemen, Axel and Andreas, who I met in Dubai, who had the South America world record as a pair. And there's another gentleman, Mark Beaumont, who's done around the world in 80 days, very famous cyclist. He's also done that route.
So you intentionally reached out to all these people as guides and mentors?
Yeah, intentionally reached out and literally bumped into the two guys in Dubai. And
cool.
and the hot debrief consists of 3 questions. And it's great because it's not just in sport, military, it's in business as well. It's what worked, what didn't work, and if we were going to do that again, what would we do differently? It's just 3 very simple questions. And so these guys were quite open in giving me all their information. They said, well, look, all their issues were in South and Central America, be it bureaucracy, languages, or spares for the bike. Apart from Carlos, his was more America. Yeah. Spares for the bikes, the weather issues, it was all down in the South.
Yeah.
But they started in Alaska and finished in Argentina. So for me, being a military guy, I was like, well, why take a gamble with the second half of the challenge? Why not address those issues early, get them out the way, and then once we're in North America, hopefully everything's behind us. And so that's what I did. One of the things I'm proud of, I turned it on its head 180, and I started from Argentina and went up.
So you attacked the biggest issues at first, got them out of the way.
Yeah, eat the frog.
Which I think is a great analogy of life and success and excellence.
Yeah.
Good on you, man.
Yeah. It was a good decision from a cycling perspective. From a logistics perspective, it was slightly different.
Wow.
So coming up, I got a tailwind in Peru. after the winds out of Argentina, the weather was great. I got tailwind in Peru, so that's 2,500 kilometers of a tailwind,
right,
which was right on my back. I took 10 days off the South America world record, before we even got to the second half. But we were having to change the vehicles in every country. You couldn't get a vehicle from Argentina to Chile. You had to swap at the border, and then Chile to Peru. So it was slowing us down.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can cross the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia, that's the only part you have to fly over or get a ferry.
Yep.
If you can get a vehicle from Alaska all the way to Argentina, coming up, we're having to swap vehicles. So Alana, our sponsor then bought an RV and a 4x4. It was in Fort Lauderdale. It was going to get shipped to Panama. And that would then, once I broke the South America world record, fly from Colombia, from Cartagena to Panama City, those vehicles would take us all our way to Alaska.
Was this planned, or you did this?
Okay. This was planned, yeah. Okay. This was planned. This wasn't planned, actually. This was planned halfway through South America.
Like mid-route.
Mid-route. We need to change the plan. And so we changed the plan. But then I was in Ecuador about 2 weeks out, and Alana gets a phone call and says that the vehicles haven't been loaded on the container. They're still here. They're still in Florida. So thankfully for me, Alana, my PA, and two of my friends flew out, and they drove the vehicles 4,000 miles in 8 days from Fort Lauderdale through Mexico all the way through Central America to Panama. So
you gotta be kidding me.
No, so I broke the world record at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by noon I flew over Alana.
The world record for South America.
For South America, yeah. And South America world record for me was just a tick off. A lot of people message me and they're like, hey, you can relax now, you've got a world record. I said, no, because that's not the world record I've told the world I'm doing. That's just a Brucey bonus, on the way. But it's one of those tick-off features in my head. And, broke the world record. Alana drove in an hour later and literally gave us the keys, and then that would then take us on. So what the importance of that is people see the front of house, they see the CEO, they see the person, the face of the business. It's actually the team around you. It was a success. So people saw me on the bike.
Yeah.
I'm riding the bike, but actually there was so many moving parts around me, which, if it wasn't for them doing that, I probably wouldn't have broke it in such a fast time. So that's the importance to them. And like Special Forces, for every operator, for us to step on the ground, jump out of a plane, whatever, takes 7 other people you don't see. Mm-hmm. 7 to 1 ratio is what it is.
Team sport, baby.
Team sport,
shooting this podcast right now. You and I, you're the talent today.
Yeah.
But my team, Pablo and Lauren in the back, and all my marketing team putting this together. That's just a great analogy for, in this case, business, but in your case, leadership, military, breaking world records.
Yeah, and if one of them wasn't here or able to do their job, then this wouldn't be happening.
Totally.
It's exactly the same in ours. It needs everyone in that team from top to bottom for it to work. And so so that was the South America issue with that. But and then I got into North America on day 70, and I'm like 14 days ahead. I'm like, perfect,
2 weeks ahead of pace.
2 weeks ahead of pace.
You're feeling great right now.
Feeling great now, and I'm like, okay, we're good. I don't know whether coming into the US was such a relief in the fact that everyone spoke the language.
Yep.
The culinary options were a lot better.
Yep.
But also the fact that the previous record holders, all their issues now were behind us. You know what I mean? So
mentally as well.
Mentally, I've eaten the frog. I've done it, and I'm now 14 days ahead. But an hour into Texas, I had 5 missed calls off Alana. She's now back in UK with the kids. And and she's very good at keeping distractions away from me. So my automatic thought was there's something wrong with the children.
Sure.
So straight off the phone, and called her, and she said, "Oh, what do you wear to a royal wedding?" I said, "Sorry." She goes, "What would you wear to a royal wedding?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding." I said, "Oh, that's nice." And she goes, "No, you don't realise you're now a day behind. The earliest flight you can get back to make the wedding is day 102. And I'm going for a 117-day world record. So 14 days, going into the phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind.
That's just like an analogy for life and business. Holy hell.
So, I had mixed emotions cycling off, my ginger friend. It was nice to be invited. But so we then had to change the second half of the challenge.
In what way?
In South America, because of the security situation and things like that, it wasn't safe to be on the roads at night.
Yeah.
So my cycling was pretty any daylight hours. So more first light to last light. In North America, we had the luxury of security. You could cycle at night. So I got to Lubbock the next day, and we had 50-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes, and so I was grounded for another day. So I was now 2 days behind. There's a great app on your phone. I used to call it my second wife because I was always looking at it. It's called Windy TV, and it just gives you the strength and directions of the winds every hour for the next 2 weeks. It's about 95% accurate. So I was just literally just scrolling the hour, looking at what the winds were doing, and I was making a plan. I had to cycle 340 miles in the next 36 hours to miss the next weather window. And so I did that. And then basically I was just playing chess with Mother Nature on the app. And most times the wind subsided was at night. So the majority of my cycling was done in the evening. But also I was using it to my advantage. I had to get to Cheyenne one morning. So I cycled from Pueblo, which is in Colorado. Yeah, all the way up to the border of Wyoming in a day, about 180 miles, because the next morning I had to be in Cheyenne. And I picked up at 9 a.m., I picked up a huge tailwind, and I cycled 270 miles in 11 hours with 10,000 feet elevation. So we had 17 days planned for North America. I cycled it in 11 and a half days. So I pulled back that time that I needed.
Shaved 6 days off.
Yeah, shaved 6 days off to get back for this wedding. And then that was short-lived, that emotion as well, because I was in a town called Whitehorse. It's about a week outside Fairbanks, and I'm in McDonald's, and because I can eat whatever I want.
You're in Alaska now.
I'm in
or Canada.
I'm just coming in Canada, just coming into Alaska, and I'm just eating all this McDonald's. And the two gentlemen I mentioned from Dubai, Axel and Andreas, were following me, and they're like, this guy's come out. He's a professional cyclist. He's got 3 other world records. He actually got the Cairo Cape Town world record, sponsored by Red Bull. Young 26-year-old, as thin as that pen. And he come out and said that he was going to cycle the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man to do it under 100 days. That was his goal. And I was like, great. So every time I hit my objective kept moving. And so for me, I could have probably just let him have a go. And then just carried on my own pace, and then sort of try and live with yourself that, did you give it your all? So I just pushed on, and for the last 2 days, I planned it. I was like, right, I've 250 miles to do, and then I'm in under the 100 days. So I did the first 50 miles, and at noon we hit this roadblock, and it's on a road called Dalton's Highway. The last 400 miles, it's where they film ice truckers.
The last 400 miles of the race.
Last 400 miles of the race takes from Fairbanks all the way up to the Arctic Ocean.
And what month is this right now?
This is in May.
Okay, so May, you're Alaska. You're like basically at the home stretch.
I'm at the home stretch. My family have now flown into Prudhoe Bay.
To see you finish.
Yeah, to see me. I think they're the only kids ever to be on the oil rig, because it's a big oil company up there. Or reserves. And so so 50 miles, hit this stop sign in the gills like that, in a big gravel road, just goes, no one's passing till 8 o'clock tonight. I was like, I'm trying to break a world record, but for them it's health and safety. So lost 8 hours straight away. I went in the RV, made a cup of tea, and again I just started looking at the map, made a plan. Thankfully it was a land in the midnight sun. It doesn't get dark in Alaska, so I had daylight at night. And so 8 o'clock that night, when the road workers moved off, I cycled all the way till 7 o'clock the next evening, the next 200 miles. The winds were so strong, I was only moving between 9 and 11 miles an hour. But I just kept going. So I cycled about 22 hours in the last 30 hours in minus 18 to make sure that I came in under the 100 days.
Holy smokes.
So we did it in 99 days, 12 hours and 56 minutes.
Just under 100.
Just under 100, yeah. So it wasn't the original plan. If I'd known about the wedding, if I'd known about the world records, it may have been too much. You don't know. I had 5 days off, free due to weather and 2 logistics. I may not have taken them off, and I may have burnt out. You just don't know.
So let me ask you the question: what worked, what didn't, and what would you do different if you had to do it again?
What worked was the south to north. I think what didn't work was the logistics. I'd probably do a bit more research and maybe speak to some of the embassies and get some sort of dispensation for that. And I wouldn't do anything different. It was my challenge. It's the way that I did it. If I was to do that again, exactly the same, it would be different. Because there's so many factors in play, the weather being one, the political situations, Nicaragua having a coup 4 weeks after, there's things that are you can't control the uncontrollables is what I say. You just go with whatever's in front of you. And I think the success of this is twofold. I sort of contradict myself. It was good to have a plan, and we had a solid plan. We had the Oracle, we had it on digital, we had it on paper. Everyone knew their roles. But actually the success was being reactive to all the changes that happened. That was a success.
Just being able to adapt and overcome.
Just adapt, overcome, just roll with it. The start point and the finish point will always be the same. The route there, where you just bounce along.
Dude, man, that's incredible. So humbled, so inspired. I guess a few more questions around this mindset. This is something you talked about. You always had a strong mindset. Was that factory installed, or was that developed? And if so, how have you developed a rock solid mindset to do incredible things like you've done, including this race?
Yeah, I get asked quite often, is it something installed or, but I think for me, as a young child, my father was the Ted Lasso of the army. He was the soccer manager, player and coach. So he was what we call a tracksuit soldier. So his whole career was sport. And so in the house, everything was competitive. Mm-hmm. So I had a very competitive drive from my father. I probably wasn't as confident until I then joined the military. And then when I started growing and then seeing that actually, although I had the competitive, I was always trying to be the first. And then when I actually realized I was up there, that mental boost then sort of helped. And then, they then got a point. I remember we have these annual reports, and every year mine would be the same, Corporal Stott, Sergeant Stott, Colour Sergeant Stott, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And it wasn't that I was arrogant, it's just that I was confident, it was oozing. And for me, it was like, well, you need to be confident because your guys are looking at you. You're leading these guys through doors, jumping out of planes and things like that. If you lack confidence, then it's going to have the ripple effect. They see fear in you, it's going to have the ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, it then became, it just became part and parcel. I was confident, nothing. And then also working with like Tier 1 Special Forces, everything has to be a success, and all it is mission success, and you have to have that right mindset. If you go in with any slight doubt, without being naive, we're not totally, thinking we're indestructible, but because we're confident in the way that we've trained and rehearsed, then we're confident we'll do it.
And how has that, I guess, led to leadership in terms of your sense of accomplishment? When you're winning, when you're victorious, I would imagine your following are going to buy in your leadership more.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you lead by example. They see the successes you're doing. I'm not a cyclist. And what I was trying to promote with this is that anyone can take a sport at any age and be successful. You see these, when you look at these other athletes, and you strip it all down, they're just normal human beings. But people don't see that. They see like these superheroes.
Yep.
I was in the Special Forces. We're just normal individuals, and that's what I'm trying to do. Trying to break down. That's what we are. We're nothing special. We didn't come from another planet. We're born on the same planet. We just surround ourselves with the right people, the right training, but also have the right attitude and approach. It starts with yourself. People say, I've always said it's belief. You need to believe yourself, because if you don't believe yourself, then no one else is going to believe you.
Where does that come from? How do you develop belief?
I think that comes from time. If I'd done that bike ride at 24 years old at a nice prime age, I probably wouldn't have done it. You can't be experienced without experiences. And so all those experiences I've done, whether it's in the military, whether it's in the security, whether it's in sport, they all relate. They're all relatable. And so I sort of look into that. What there might not be the exact same experiences, but they're similar scenarios. How did you do? What worked? What didn't? What would you do differently? And just having those 3 questions in everything you do. So
and like stacking the wins and winning and sensing accomplishment. And when you do those, like that just adds to the whole ethos of your mindset to strengthen your leadership perspective. So it all just kind of force multiplies together. Yeah,
exactly. And we're telling about all the success stories. There's failures along the way. People see the successes, but you also need to, balance with the failures. Don't think you'd be successful and win at everything, because no one can. Mm-hmm. No one can. But it's how you deal with those failures and those losses. Pick yourself back up and crack. Like for me, I picked myself up after the parachuting injury. It took me 5 years to pick myself up, but
you did.
And realize, I then realized that I am still physically capable of doing stuff. It might not be running anymore, but I can do it into another sport.
My man, Dean, this has been so freaking inspiring. I'm just fired up. Hopefully, audience, you are too. I'm standing in the presence of greatness, relentless pursuit of excellence, which I know is your mantra. So you've been gracious with your time. I still have a few more minutes, so I'm going to round us down with the bonus round and see us out, if that works for you, my friend.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, bonus round. You are a hero to many. Who is your biggest hero and why?
My biggest hero, I'd never watched telly, never read comics as a kid. My probably biggest hero looking back is my father. My parents split up when I was younger. At the age of 8, and my father would travel 240 miles every other weekend to pick me and my sisters up. He put his career on hold. And now being a military man, I knew how much he sacrificed for that. He told me I'd last 2 minutes when I joined the military. It wasn't the best things, but I know that's reverse psychology. I know he had good intentions. My father.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah.
On the flip side, what about enemy or villain? Who is your biggest villain or a force that you're, I guess, looking to overcome?
Well, probably the biggest villain's myself. My biggest enemy is myself. And sometimes, believe it or not, I doubt myself a lot. My wife was the one, or not so much anymore.
Yep.
I believe it now. But in the earlier stages when I left the military, I was like, I can't do that, because... I can't ask for that amount of money. And she goes, no, you're worth that money. I goes, yeah, but my friends are good at that. She goes, no, you're different from your, I didn't see how good I was or the potential that I had within. It was someone else who had to pull it out of me. So my biggest enemy and villain was probably myself.
You seem fearless, but, as we know, we're humans, right?
Yes.
What's your biggest fear and why? My
biggest fear probably is failure. Anyone who says they're fearless talks rubbish. Everyone has fears. You need to have fears. I take some of those fears and I turn it into positive energy. For me, I've got myself in a position that everyone expects you're going to do it all the time. Actually, when I did the bike ride, we had a documentary team, and the director was like to my wife, this guy is showing no emotion. It's like a military operation.
Machine, baby.
Yeah, it's like machine. I was just hitting my targets. So and then we had a coffee in the RV and we got chatting, and didn't even realize the camera was on. And I said, look, everyone has fear. I said, look, my biggest fear is so the unrelenting pursuit of excellence is an ethos to the UK Special Forces, which me and my wife had trademarked for physical activity. And so the unrelenting pursuit of excellence is ethos UK Special Forces. So I said to them, I've told the world this is our ethos. What does it look like to the world if I fail this challenge? So actually, my pressures I had on the bike ride were self-induced. I had no pressures from the sponsors, no pressures from the charities. They were loving it. Mm-hmm. For me, it was whether I could show face in the bar again, back in the Special Forces unit. And that was it. So that was my biggest fear is failure.
But you channeled that.
But you channel it. You just take those fears, adrenaline, like when the guys are parachuting, doing things, a lot of guys don't even like jumping or diving, but they do it. They just channel it and have a positive output.
Leadership. You've certainly led yourself, led an incredible amount of team in your Special Forces career, given a lot of incredible advice. What's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received and why?
My best piece of advice was when I was out. I just no, it wasn't. When I was in. It was actually the evening I met Alana, and it wasn't from Alana. It was from a mutual friend, and he said, "You make your own luck." And that's what he told me. You make your own luck. Because I was. I knew I'd seen what some of the guys were doing, and I was like, I can't do that. He said, "No, you make your own luck." Nothing gets handed to you on a plate, and I sort of took that, and that's what I've probably done in my private security career. As you know, recently with Israel, within 24 hours of it going off, I flew out there. You make your own luck. You go out there. You see opportunities. You see certain opportunities, and you just grab them. No one's going to give it on a plate, So make your own luck was one that stood out for me.
Love it. All right, my friend. 2 last questions.
Yeah.
Our audience is watching you and seeing the list of accomplishments and all the things that you've done. Also, the transitions you've made in your life, which creates transition identity and accomplishment. From your lens, what's your parting piece of wisdom or message for someone listening or watching this podcast? They know they're meant for something better.
Yeah.
But there's a transition ahead, but they're scared, they're nervous, they have that self-doubt. What is your parting piece of wisdom for them?
So my parting piece of wisdom for them, and I've used it before with some of my recruits and going forward, even myself, is anticipation is worse than participation. People overthink things too much. When actually, once they then take the leap, they've done it, they then look back on reflection like, actually, that wasn't that bad. So I'd say anticipation is worse than participation. Jump 2 feet in.
All right, my friend, as you can see from the sign back, the name of this show, this podcast is the Fitness CEO Podcast. Dean, from your lens, what does it mean to be a CEO?
I think to be a CEO, you're in charge of your own destiny. I left an environment in the military where I was being told what to do and what to do, and I quite like that. But now coming back, if there is a mistake, if something's gone wrong, there's no one I look to blame. It's on me. So you're in charge of your own destiny, and enjoy it. Don't be scared. A lot of people are scared. They like to have that comfort of knowing that they've got some sort of top cover. You are the top cover. You will make mistakes. Don't worry about it. Just do the hot debrief. What worked, what didn't work. And if you're going to do it again, what did you do differently? So again, about the failure. People do fail. People do make mistakes. But I don't like to call them failures. I like to call them experiences. So you've had that experience. But if you make that same mistake again, then you haven't learned from that experience. So you can make mistakes, as many mistakes as you want, as long as they're not repeated.
All right, before we wrap, I want to give you the opportunity to make sure our audience can connect with you. Awesome book, Relentless. Where can our audience find you if this is the first time they're connecting?
So I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook as Dean Stott, and website deanstott.com.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes. Dean, my friend, this has been awesome. It was great connecting a few months ago at BK Live, and I guess I just want to spend a few words, not only to thank you for being on the show, but just acknowledge you as a person. And when I look back and, short time knowing each other, but connecting now the second time, seeing you on stage, seeing them in the green room, courageous, leadership, passion, but most importantly, heart. Your ability to help other people, come with a serving heart, your huge heart for philanthropy, that just says a lot about you. So I just wanted to thank you and acknowledge you for that.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, my friends, I know you got a ton of value, assuming you did. To ask for you. If you can like this particular episode and share this with someone who needs a sense of inspiration, some motivation to attack their life and attack their big dreams, that would help us a lot. And assuming you got a lot of value, please do. And as always, my man, Dean, appreciate you being on the show. If no one is coming to save you, you must save yourself, and the time is now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.